You know, when we open the book of Esther, we're stepping into a very unique and honestly, a very unsettling part of Israel's story. This is a story from exile, a time when God seems incredibly distant, even silent. And that silence, well, that's the central mystery of this entire book. It's actually one of only 2 books in the whole Bible where God's name isn't openly mentioned, not even once. So that leads us to the big question. Why? Why would a book like this be in the Bible at all? And the answer is simple, but it's also incredibly profound. It's because this story teaches us how God works, even when he doesn't announce himself. To really understand this, you have to feel the setting in your bones. They're not in Jerusalem anymore. There is no temple. There are no prophets speaking God's word aloud. There are no sacrifices being offered. This is what exile feels like. It's a kind of spiritual emptiness. So the whole story is set against this backdrop of exile and this constant, nagging pressure for God's people to just, well, to blend in, to assimilate, to disappear. Let's look at the timeline for a moment to see where we are. The Babylonian Empire, the one that first dragged Israel into exile, well, it's gone. The powerful Persian Empire now rules the known world under a king named Xerxes. And here's the thing, many of the Jewish people could have gone home by now, but they didn't. They stayed scattered, choosing the comfort they knew over the long, hard journey back. And that right there, that leads to the central tension of the entire story, assimilation. It's this deep pressure to just blend in, to hide who you really are, either for your own safety or just for comfort in a land that isn't yours. It's the temptation to become invisible. Now, this pressure shapes all of our main characters. First, there's Esther. Her Jewish name is Hadassah. She's an orphan who, against all odds, becomes the queen of Persia, but she does it by hiding her identity. Then there's her cousin, Mordecai. He's actually the one who told her to keep her heritage a secret. And then there's Haman. He's an Agagite, a descendant of an ancient enemy of Israel, and he's just risen to a position of enormous power. And it's here, in the shadows of the Persian court, that a series of events start to unfold. Events that seem totally random, but as we're about to see, they all point to an unseen hand at work, a kind of divine providence. The whole conflict really starts with pride. Haman is furious when Mordecai refuses to bow down to him, but his rage becomes something far darker, something genocidal. He's not satisfied with killing just one man. He decides to exterminate Mordecai's entire people. He even casts lots, called pur in his language, to pick the exact date for the slaughter. And then the impossible starts to happen. First, one night, the king, he just can't sleep, so he calls for the royal records to be read to him. A servant brings the book and just happens to open it to a random page, a page that details how Mordecai once saved the king's life. And right at that exact moment, Haman walks in, ready to ask the king for permission to hang that very same Mordecai. You see, there are just too many coincidences. It's all way too precise, too perfectly timed. And this is the whole point of the story. This is not chance. This is providence. God is moving, invisibly, silently, but absolutely decisively behind the scenes. And all of this leads us to the very heart of the story. The moment when a hidden identity has to be revealed. The moment when a life has to be put on the line. The moment of decision. Mordecai gets a message to Queen Esther, telling her about the plot. He warns her that even she won't be safe in the palace. And then he asks this question, this challenge that just echoes down through history. Who knows whether you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this? And in that moment, Esther understands everything. Her faith can't be a secret anymore. She has to act. She has to risk her own life by going to the king without being summoned, which was a death sentence. And her response is just filled with this quiet, resolute courage. If I perish, I perish. What happens next is this incredible, stunning reversal. Haman, who planned to hang Mordecai, is himself hanged on the very gallows he built for him. The Jewish people, who were all sentenced to death, are suddenly given the right to defend themselves. Haman, who was so powerful, is utterly destroyed, and Mordecai rises to take his place in the kingdom. So, what does this ancient story, with its silent God, have to say to us today? The message is profound, and it's actually woven into the very fabric of the story itself. You see, the reason God is never named is because in a time of exile, the story itself is the message. God is there. You just have to know where to look. He's hidden in the coincidences. He's present in the great reversal. He is sovereign over all of it, working in the shadows. He might be unseen, but he is never, ever absent. And this story, it fits into a larger pattern of faithfulness in exile. Think about Daniel, who lived around the same time. Both he and Esther lived under pagan rule. Both rose to power without compromising their faith. But where Daniel was famous for his very public refusal to assimilate, Esther's defining moment came when she bravely revealed the very identity she had been hiding. Both show us that God uses people who refuse to simply disappear into the world around them. So the book of Esther really leaves us with three deep, enduring truths. First, that God uses individual people, your life, my life, to change the course of history. Second, God preserves his people against all odds. And third, that God is the one who truly rules over the kingdoms of this world. He raises up kings and he takes them down, guiding all of human history toward his own good purpose. And this matters for us right now because in a very real sense, we too are in exile. Our ultimate citizenship is somewhere else. We live our lives in kingdoms that are not our final home, and the temptation for us is always the same. Just blend in, stay quiet, hide who we really are. This is why Esther is in the Bible. It leaves us with a question that we need now more than ever. In a world where God can seem so silent, where his presence feels hidden, how do we trust the God we cannot see, the God we cannot always hear or even name, yet the God we must obey?